This is a very introductory course that I am putting together to help get people who are familiar with doing some kind of software development into virtual reality development a little more easily. I developed this course largely because I was going through the Unity tutorials and getting into working with Unity and what's different about that versus web development or other kinds of development. And one of the things that I noticed, one of the things that drove me a little batty about it was that, as soon as they got into the programming and scripting portions of it, they're like, talking about, oh, this is a public variable versus a private variable and stuff. And I'm just like, you guys are killing me, right? I've been programming since 1995. I know the difference between a public and a private variable. I've been doing this for just a little while. And so, I didn't want to go through all of the basics. And, I work with a lot of professionals. I work with a wonderful array of scientists and engineers. And, these people have been doing software development like I have. And again, they're not looking to start from, ground zero of, how do I program, a hello world. They already know how to do that. They just want to learn what's new about this upcoming technology. Why is it exciting? I put this course together to help deal with that. So I have taught this course at the professional level for working professionals. I do indie game development, so in my free time, I run Draco Software, which is a little indie game dev studio. I put in a couple hours a week here and there, and I make stuff. So I made a game called Don't Get Hit in the Face, which was an excellent exercise for me for creating a very minimalist game. Like, how simple can I make something and still have it be a game and still be recognizable as such and marketable as such. And that was successful. It's made a couple $100. It's not like it's any kind of, retirement plan. But I think it was very successful. Pushed me to learn some skills that I otherwise wouldn't have learned. It was a great kind of project for me to do. And those are the kinds of projects that I'm expecting to come out of this course. Now, the people taking this course, this is not a step-by-step tutorial on how to build a certain virtual reality experience, right? If you're looking to make, if you're looking for a step-by-step guide that holds your hand through every part of the process and every line of code of, this is how you make a, don't get hit in the face clone or something like that. That's not what this is about. This is a higher level course, right? These are for people who already have an idea of something that they want to do in VR and they just want to get started. I am going to encourage anybody who is watching this and working with this to try to think of that minimum viable game, that minimum viable product. Because you can always iterate and add more to it later, but really boiling it down to the basics is going to help make sure that you get something out early that you can work with and use as kind of a platform to learn on. Things are required equipment. So first thing, VR development is still very much a PC world. Mac is getting better. This is as of the 7th of July, 2017. Apple has started to put pieces in place in their hardware and their software so that they are going to be able to drive some of the VR headsets and whatnot. I know some people are pushing that envelope a little bit, but there's nothing that is kind of good to go, right? It's not set up and ready to go. So you're going to need a PC. Same issue with Linux. I know some people are, monkeying around with it, and Steam is very Linux friendly, but the VR stuff just doesn't work super hot in VR. So, highly recommend a PC. With Windows 10, especially if you're developing for something like the HoloLens or the Windows Mixed Reality, it has to be Windows 10. You can do Windows 7 otherwise. Let's see. What else do you need? So you'll need Unity 3D for this course. There is also Unreal Engine, which I've worked with, which is an excellent game engine. It has some very different licensing properties in Unity. You can go to the two and figure out which is which. However, Unity's become kind of a de facto standard. I think it's probably used 3 or 4 to 1 over Unreal, just before ease of development. And for that reason, that is why I use it in this course. Visual Studio 2017, if you're on a Windows machine. If you are being brave and you're using a Mac, then Unity will come with MonoDevelop, which is a C# development environment for Mac. I also recommend, as of this week, so late breaking part of what I'm doing is updating course material. As of this week, highly recommend Google Blocks. One of the things that happens anytime that I start talking about VR development is people start wondering about assets and where they get models and things like that. And then if they want to custom make something, it's like, well, use Blender, which is a phenomenally powerful piece of software, which is unfortunately also phenomenally difficult to learn. It is just a fantastic piece of open source software, and is a testament to the power of the open source movement, as much as Linux is, in my opinion. However, it's also the learning curve is nightmarish. So I don't, if you can avoid going down, learning Blender to do your thing, I recommend it. So now Google Blocks is out, and I really recommend using that because they've made some of this 3D modeling stuff much easier to do. So those are the things that I think are required. Oh, and a VR headset, of course. So you can have an HTC Vive or an Oculus Rift. You can do VR development on like your cell phone or HoloLens or with a PSVR or something like that. The problem is when you do development, especially when you're learning this stuff, there is a workflow issue where you're working in your game development environment and then you want to run it, and you can't run it right out of that game development environment. You got to go set up another build process and a deployment process, like to get it over to your cell phone. And so there's a whole bunch more steps involved, and each one can take a minute or two, which doesn't seem like it's that big a deal. But when you're, rapidly iterating and you're learning stuff and you're new to this, that's a lot of wasted time. You compound that over dozens of iterations of deployments, and that really does add up. So having a Rift or a Vive, which is able to interact directly with the game development engine, so that you can manipulate things in your Unity IDE, is a huge time saver. Highly recommend. So one of those two devices. If you're in the market and you're not sure which to get, it really depends on your situation. If you have a large open space, such as I have in my house, then I recommend the Vive. It has much better room scale tracking, and the controllers are quite good. The Oculus Rift is similarly capable. It's a little cheaper, actually. It's I think $200 cheaper. Again, as of today's date, July 7th, 2017. The issue is with the Oculus Rift. The controllers, the room tracking doesn't work as good in the Oculus Rift. So it's much better for a standing experience or a seated experience, but it's not as good for being able to walk around. That said, I do think the Rift's controllers are slightly superior. Aside from that, the devices are remarkably similar. For two different companies developing different things, there's definitely been some design convergence. And so, there has been, a remarkable amount of, this or that. I prefer the Vive just by a hair. But, the truth of the matter is if you don't have the space to set up the Vive, it's not worth it. But if you're getting the Oculus Rift, you have the option of getting or not getting the hand controllers. Absolutely spend the $100. Get the touch controllers that come that you can buy with the Oculus Rift. They are by far, having that hand presence in VR instead of holding your controller or something makes a huge difference. So do that. Promise. Makes a huge difference. Worth $100. So that said, much of what the rest of this is going to be is I'm actually re-recording this because the first time I had a little trouble with this data stream. what we're going to do is a lot of things I'm going to go over are the things that I would normally teach somebody who would come to my VR lab. But it also applies for folks who would be, just getting their system set up and are just getting into their development at home. So first thing, if you buy an HTC Vive, again, really do like this equipment. It's highly capable. I do highly recommend it. One of the things that I also must say is that the wrist straps that come with the Vive are crap. So this is one of the original wrist straps, and as you can see, the fabric that was coming out of here is no longer there. And because what happened was I was playing a game, and the glue gave up, and so the controller left my hand and hit the wall, and this controller no longer works because the wrist straps are bad. Nintendo had this problem with the Wii, where they had a couple of wrist straps that would break from time to time, and there were a number of lawsuits which made it so that Nintendo got made better and better and better wrist straps. And it turns out that you can go buy Nintendo wrist straps online. So I highly recommend just going, and I think they're like $1.50 or $2 each, something like that. Go out, buy yourself a couple of Nintendo wrist straps. Because after the lawsuits that Nintendo has endured, they have really gotten the wrist strap right. And so those are kind of best of breed, and they work fine with Vive. So that's actually what these are on my current controllers, is the Nintendo wrist straps. So putting on a VR headset. A lot of times, so first of all, setting up your VR headset, that's something I can't help you with. Every room is a little different. And there's a lot of differences between the Vive and the Rift. Thankfully, both of the companies have really good instructions on how to set up the VR for your space. So don't worry too much about it. Just follow their instructions and go for it. When I have somebody come into VR for the first time, there are a few experiences that I think are excellent introductory experiences. People are very nervous about motion sickness. They've heard about motion sickness, or they tried like an Oculus Rift development kit and somebody put them in a roller coaster simulator, which is a terrible idea. And they've experienced some motion sickness before. So above and beyond, the number one thing for an introductory experience is that it has to be comfortable. And I found some things that are very good introductory experiences. So if you have an Oculus Rift, the First Contact app that comes with it, with the touch controllers, where you can, let butterflies land on your finger and shoot little pistols and whatnot. Highly recommend. I think that's an excellent first application. And then usually from there, I'll go into Oculus Medium or maybe Google Earth. Google Earth is pretty good, but it has a flying mechanism that does trigger motion sickness. They mitigated it with some of their design, so it's not awful, but it's still not perfect. It still gets some individuals, so that's kind of a more of a moderate comfort as opposed to a highly comfortable experience. For the HTC Vive, they have their intro tutorial. It's okay, but I find it's a little slow paced. So first things for this, Tilt Brush or Google Blocks. So, again, a couple more Google pieces of software. Tilt Brush came with the Vives for some people. Google Blocks is, again, a piece of software that just came out this week. It is a very helpful, useful piece of software. So go ahead and use that as a good, kind of intro, just getting comfortable with VR. Because some of the design elements, and we'll talk about this in later weeks, what design elements allow people to be comfortable and feel safe, and then which cause problems. But this Google Blocks is very well designed for people to be comfortable, as is First Contact and Oculus Medium. So, without further ado, I'm going to walk through this as if you were in my lab or my home, and we're doing kind of a first, intro to VR. So, first things first is the wrist straps. And, as I previously mentioned, if you don't wear the wrist straps, your controllers go flying off and damaging themselves or something around your house. That said, that's actually not the main reason why I insist on people wearing control straps. So, HTC Vive, you press these buttons to start up the controllers, and that'll also start up the rest of the system. So, The other reason why I highly recommend that you wear the wrist straps is because if you are holding the controllers, right, then it's hard to put on the headset. However, if you put the controllers down on the table and put on your headset, now you've put on your headset and you can't see the controllers. And so you end up doing this like weird, like trying to peek under the headset to find your controllers thing. And anybody who's owned, VR headset, we've done it. We've all done it. And so the absolute easiest thing to do is to put the wrist straps on so that then you can put the headset on, and then when you have the headset on and are blind to reality, you know where your controllers are. So, headset. Both the Rift and the Vive actually, again, they kind of both have similar designs, remarkably, even though that they were made by different companies, although there's been some legal actions between the two. Well, I guess not between Vive. I guess it was id and Oculus, not Vive and Oculus. So, even though they're designed by two different companies, they have kind of converged on the design, which is Velcro on either side of the face near the temples, and then one strap along the top. I generally have a harder time adjusting this top strap, and so if I can get away without adjusting it, I try to. Some people have a very large crown, though, or a very tall crown, and so you do have to adjust it. But if I can get away without adjusting it, I can, because it's a little harder to do when this darn thing is on your face. The temple ones, on the other hand, highly recommend, especially when you're first putting it on. You make these really loose. The Rift, you can just leave them open. The Vive doesn't do that. They can kind of come out from these clips. So just make it really loose. And part of the reason why we're doing this is one of the main complaints we get when somebody is putting on a VR headset for the first time is that things look a little blurry. If things look a little blurry, it's usually because the optics aren't aligning with the eyes, and that is often because it's not fitting well. So it needs to be snug on the face without being super crazy tight. You shouldn't be losing feeling in your nose, but it should be pretty thoroughly strapped on there. It shouldn't have a lot of play up and down. It should be able to sit there. Sometimes you'll see people that are holding the headset in place at a certain angle so that they can see things better. That's usually a sign that it's not sitting right and needs to be adjusted. Let's see, what else? Oh, glasses. I am very, very, very nearsighted. And you think, oh, well, in this case, the screen is only, a couple inches, a few centimeters away from my face, and I should be able to wear this just fine without glasses. The trick is, with these Fresnel lenses, the optics in here is trying to make it look like things are farther away. And so by projecting that information into the parts of my eye, in order to create that illusion, it basically successfully when it works right, it makes it look like things are further away, and so it's really blurry. So yes, I wear my glasses in here. The Rift has a habit of grabbing my glasses and pulling them off, so sometimes I'll wear croakers or something like that to keep my glasses on as I take the Rift on and off. All right, so putting this puppy on, just usually pull it back in the back first, and then pull it over my eyes. Now, of course, this is way too loose, and it's in fact so loose that it's jarred my glasses here. All right, and then we'll tighten these guys up. Double check it, and I'm going to retighten it just a little bit, and now it's on nice and snug, and so I can bounce it around like this a little bit and that a little bit, and it doesn't do terrible things. It stays pretty much where it should be, and then we're pretty much fit. Okay, so I am going to move the camera and point it over to my VR space. So I am sorry for jarring the camera and bouncing you around a little bit, but it's what's going to happen. I'm also going to switch the audio over to the microphone in the headset. Unfortunately, the microphone here isn't as nice as my desktop microphone, but if I don't do that, you won't be able to see it, or you won't be able to hear me at all. So let's go ahead and do this. So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start up Google Blocks. And again, the reason why I use Google Blocks is because as wonderful as Blender is, and it is a very high-test, professional-grade piece of software, which is a little much for beginners to be able to use immediately. So, all right, so I'm going to start up blocks and make sure that it's in the right segment of my screen. There we go, and that's up and running. And oh, it's nighttime in Google Blocks. Look at that. Didn't know it did that. Okay, and then I'm going to switch my audio. All right, that should be my headset with VR. Okay, so I'm going to say no to the tutorial. And I am just going to make a super quick thing here in VR. So I'm going to pick a square, right? And so the idea here is, again, this is a first experience in VR. I want it to be comfortable. I want to be able somebody to do something cool. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is neat, right? So they're able to do that. And then, oh yeah, and then they can duplicate it. Look at that. Right, and move around here, and so wow, they can get a feel for moving things in VR and how natural that is. And just do that, and I'll just do that, right, and come back, and so people pick up this app very quickly. It's actually a very simple program, but it does its job excellently. So I have no complaints. All right, so yeah, so we'll just put that one there. Right, and we will put that one there. I'll grab that. I'll bring it up. That one. Put it there. Yeah. Okay. And then I'll grab that. Say, boom, VR. Look at that. I made something in VR. And again, this is just a real comfortable beginner thing. The other thing that's nice about Google Blocks, and one of the reasons why I'm using it in this particular case, is because the output files of this are things that you can bring into the game engine that we'll be using. So people are going to be able to create stuff and have some fun. So it's not just oh wow, I made this in VR. It's that they made this, and then we can do stuff with it. We can animate it. We can turn it into part of a game or something like that. So there we go. Very simple model. And so I'm just going to go ahead and save, and I'm going to click save locally. And yes, saved locally. Great. And so that's a good, just kind of low-key first VR experience. And if somebody wants to check out more things, this might be where you use Oculus Medium or Google Earth or go into some games, that kind of thing. I generally leave interactive experiences such as Invasion, like the videos. I leave those until after class, let people still have access to the tools or the equipment so that they can check those things out, but we're not necessarily, burning up lap time using them. Okay, so that's wonderful. I come back, place that down. Try not to blast anybody's ears as I switch microphones and whatnot. Okay. So we are back here and set up the camera back up there. Okay. So, great. What's next? Well, next is we need to get the computer kitted up for doing VR development. So, in this case, what we're going to be using is Unity 3D and Visual Studio, Google Blocks again. So Google Blocks is free, same with Unity, and same with Visual Studio. So you'll want Visual Studio 2017 Community Edition. Not this one. This takes you to the store. That's not the one you want. Down here over the downloads IDE and whatnot, you'll see that there's 4 different versions of Visual Studio. You want this guy on the left. Visual Studio Community 2017, free download. That's what you want. This Visual Studio Code is really more of a competitor to like Sublime Text. It's not as full-featured as a Visual Studio Community 2017. Now, when you install Visual Studio 2017, you may see some settings in there that's like, oh, well, install for game development and we'll install Unity for you. Don't do that, because usually the version of Unity that they install is an older version. It's a couple of versions out of date. So I highly recommend getting the latest version of Unity from Unity. So you just go to unity3d.com, and they are working feverishly to release 2017.1, launching sometime in July. Just click on Get Unity. And this is going to have some in-VR editing tools as well, I believe, is going to be part of this next release. They've been experimental for a while. We're not that worried about that so much right now. Again, it'll be a nice tool, but we will, we're going to be really focusing more on the code aspect, and you're not going to be coding while you're in VR. So for learning purposes, just go ahead and get personal. Don't worry about Plus or Pro. Certainly don't worry about Enterprise. Go ahead and get the personal version. I'm also going to recommend that, as you get more and more advanced and you're like, okay, I want to release a game or make something, you start looking into the Plus or Pros. Just keep in mind that what they don't tell you is that there's a 1-year commitment for these prices. So it's not like you're going to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to develop a game for a couple months. I'm just going to release it. It'll cost me, maybe $70 because I'm only going to be really doing this for 2 months. And then I'm going to release, my cool little game, and that'll be fine. No, you can't get away with that. So it is going to cost you, a few $100s even for the Plus, because there is that 1-year commitment. And they don't mention that, which makes me grumpy, which is why I'm mentioning it. And that's it. Google Blocks you can get from the Oculus Store or Steam. So in this case, I have the Vive, so I'm going to be using Steam. So you just come in here and do Google Blocks. Oh, Blocks by Google, whatever. And there it is. And so you can just download that, and then you're good to go. You have all the tools you need to get started with VR development. So